Good morning, everyone. My name is Harm Schoten, Director of Eurosite, the European Land Conservation Network. And I'm very happy to be able to open this webinar on natural grazing. It's initiated by Natuurmonumenten, and organization is combined with Staatsbosbeheer, the State Forestry Management of the Netherlands, and the Polish Society for the Coast and Eurosite. The intention is to organize this year two in-person grazing study tours, one in the Netherlands and one in northern parts of Poland. So we thought it might be a good idea to organize a kind of preview and to hear what we can expect during these in-person study tours, and also to learn what are the effects of natural grazing and what did we learn from research in the recent years, or maybe I should say decades, because I think we almost at a 40-year celebration of introducing natural grazing in at least in the Netherlands and also in other parts of Europe. So today we have four excellent speakers, I would say. I'm very happy with them. We will start with Ruben Vermeer from Natuurmonumenten. We'll speak about a forest area in a forested area in the Netherlands. Then Perry Cornelissen from Staatsbosbeheer, who is really an expert in the Oostvaardersplassen, but also other parts in the Netherlands on natural grazing. From Poland, we have Kazimierz Rabski. He will present the Oder Delta National Park, but also Wolin National Park. Unfortunately, the speaker from Wolin National Park is not available because she had a funeral today. And the final presentations is from Mariusz Miotke, and his colleague from OTOP, also from Poland. So a few words about Eurosite. Maybe it's good for you to know the Eurosite is it's already for 30 years. We are the connecting site managers all over Europe. Currently, we have 80 members in 25 European member states. And our core issue, the core reason of being for us, is to connect site managers and exchange knowledge and expertise. And the way we do that is several via projects, but mainly through our working groups. And I listed them here. We have 9 thematic working groups. So if you're interested to join one of these working groups, please feel free to contact us at info@eurosite.org. Today's grazing webinar and also the grazing study tours are organized together with the Eurosite Management Planning Expert Group, MPEG, and also with the Economic and Ecosystem Services Working Group. Then we have the Agriculture and Biodiversity Conservation Group, who is also very active on extensive grazing. Since, in my experience, extensive livestock grazing and natural grazing is coming more and more together, but we will see that also during the presentations. Okay, thank you. And then I would like to give the first floor to Ruben Vermeer from Natuurmonumenten, who will share his experiences from the Veluwe zone. Welcome, Ruben.
Thank you very much, Harm. I will share my screen so you can see my presentation. All right. One moment. And then I put it here. So yes, let me first introduce myself a little bit. My name is Ruben Vermeer, and I'm an ecologist working at the Veluwe Zone National Park, which is part of Natuurmonumenten. And the title of my presentation is Grazing as a Motor for a Diverse Landscape at the Veluwe Zone. The Veluwe Zone, as Harm told before, is one of the places that you possibly can visit during the grazing tour in May in Holland. And during this presentation, I'm going to talk to you about the history of introducing grazing at the Veluwe Zone, and also some of the effects. But of course, I'm not going to tell all the effects, because otherwise the field trip is not as exciting as it could be. So where are we actually? in the beginning. We are at the Veluwe zone, and the Veluwe zone is part of the Veluwe. It's the largest forest in Holland. It's situated somewhere in the middle of Holland, and the Veluwe zone is on the southeastern part. It's for most of the people well known for the landscape you see on the left. For Holland, this is a quite unique landscape with quite some hills, some valleys, and if you look at the relief map, you can see that especially if you compare it to the rest of Holland, it's quite hilly. And it makes it a quite interesting and unique park in the Netherlands, and yeah, some unique species and plants that are only growing in this part of Holland. So about grazing. Our grazing started in 1982. In this year, 5-year forest grazing trial started at the Inbos. This is a part that lays on the more higher parts of the Veluwe zone, in the middle of the area. And the target of what we try to establish with this kind of grazing was an opportunity for a more diverse vegetation, because you can see on the picture, it's a picture of the situation before grazing. The undergrowth is mostly dominated by grasses, mostly wavy hair grass or Avenella flexuosa. And the trees are yeah, still a relic of foresting, which is mostly Scots pine. So we introduced in a quite small area some highlanders, but actually the reason why we started this grazing was some years before the 80s. Because in the 1970s there were some enormous storms in Holland. Especially the storms from 72 and 73 blew large parts of the Veluwe completely down. And it was not a big surprise, because most of the forests were used for forestry. So they had the same age, the same species, so they were quite vulnerable for this kind of storms. And as a result of all the trees were blown down, there was also a larger risk of all kinds of bark beetles, especially Tomicus pinnipeda. It's, I think, a well-known species throughout Europe, which initially were feeding on the dead trees, but eventually also going to the living trees. So this was also, in terms of forestry, a big risk. So they came up with a solution, in my eyes, a pretty obvious solution, that the forest had to manage in a more natural way. So we start monitoring this effect, and I say we, not by myself, because I didn't, I was not around yet, but my colleagues start monitoring the effects of grazing. And on the left, you see a picture of the situation before, and on the right side, a picture 4 years later. And you can clearly see, even the picture is in black and white, a big difference. A lot of the grass is disappeared, and in the undergrowth, and you have to trust me, it's a vegetation of bilberry, Vaccinium myrtillus. Another effect was that the soil was much more compressed, so the O-horizon or humus layer was compressed, and at some places even disappeared. And of course, this meant there were new conditions for different kinds of plants and trees to grow over there. So the effects were quite promising, but still 4 years is only a small period in terms of effect of grazing. And the next slide is a little, we go in our time machine a little bit further. And on the left side, you see almost the same location as in the pictures before. You can see a nice structured heathland vegetation. But still, we have large grazes, but also some very small. And one of those in some years can be, yeah, I can say quite annoying. They are quite abundant, and heather beetle is grazing in those heathland vegetations. And in 2015, yeah, it looks again completely different. So there, over the years, we had a lot of changes as an effect of grazing. Of course, heather beetle is a completely different kind of grazing according to grazing with highland cows. But still, there are some big effects. But if you look closely to the vegetation, the heather is again sprouting again, and after a few years, it will grow back. But back to the initial grazing trial, because in 1987 we concluded that we were happy with the type of grazing and the effects it had on the forest. So in the first place, we had an enclosure of 176 hectares. It was mainly forest, some small heathland, as you saw in the picture before, and some working roads. And after 1987, we enlarged it quite a bit. So now the forest area is over 1,000 hectares. The heathland is 481 hectares. And there was a new type of terrain, I call it in this case other open terrain, and some roads. And the other open terrain is mainly formal farmlands. In the other picture, you see an example of this former farmlands. And this is, I would say, not really unique, but all over the Veluwe, you can see this small patches of former farmland. It's somehow a relic of the former land use, because a lot of this landscape on the Veluwe is formed by a quite intensive form of grazing by sheep. We had only on the Veluwe about 30 or 40 herds of sheep who were grazing the area. And all the poop from the sheep allowed local farmers on some places to enrich the ground and start farming. It was not big time farming, but it was suitable for the people, the few people who were living on the Veluwe. And these parts are still a little bit more richer than the surroundings, because the Veluwe is mostly quite poor sand grounds, which are not very nutritious. So by adding this type of terrain into the grazing areas of the cows, it had a magnetic effect on them. So they were very keen on grazing on those more grassy areas. Very obvious, but still it was an interesting thing to follow. And we tried to follow this by a pretty simple thing, by making some enclosures. You can see one of these enclosures on the picture, and the effect of the outside of the roster of the fence. You can see the vegetation is pretty low. It's mostly eaten away, and inside you can see small trees sprouting. The grass is a bit more rougher, and it's you can clearly see the effect of the cows are grazing. It's good to mention that in the area there are also roe deer and red deer living, and of course red deer and roe deer can enter these enclosures. So it's not that there is none grazing in the enclosures, but at least not by cows. And in the right corner, you can see an enclosure in some heathland, and the effects of grazing by highland cows are different. They don't eat the heather as much, and the difference between the left and right side of the fence are much smaller. All right. Another thing we started in 1978 was the introduction of Icelandic horses. We put the horses in a different part of the Veluwe zone. I will show you in which part in a few slides. But as you can see, the landscape where the horses are grazing is completely different. and that is because of the soil is much richer. It's loess soil. I hope I pronounce it good. And this type of soil you can find on the edges of the Veluwe zone near the valleys. And it has a completely different effect on the vegetation. Funnily enough, we still call this a type of heathland, but with a lot of more herbs and short grasses. And we thought that grazing by horses was a better method of grazing, because of course horses are grazing in a different kind than cows. They biting the vegetation and can graze much lower to the ground, while cows are grabbing it with their tongue and pulling it out. Mostly much larger or much higher vegetation. So it was an interesting thing for us to put these types of grazing next to each other. It's important to know that these types of grazing are not interfering. We have a place only for the horses, and we have a place only for the cows. And one of the reasons we did this because we found out that the horses, although the soil was richer and there was more food to find, still during some hard winters, the horses are much more struggling by finding their food. So we needed a situation that we can find the horses more easily, and that we were able to feed them in the most extreme winters when there was not enough food for them. So it was for us a very nice addition to have grazing also by horses. There are also some side effects by the grazing of horses. One of the things we encountered was that they really like to feed on the bark of our beeches. On the Veluwe zone, we have quite some lane beeches who are historically planted between some larger land houses. And on the picture you can obviously see that these trees are struggling. Some trees even died, and they are reacting to the eating of the horses. So we had to put a fence on some of these areas to prevent the trees from eaten away by the horses. Another effect was that they were making these cattle pads in the heathlands. Probably you know that horses are not eating all over the area, but they prefer some areas where they can find the most nutritious food. So they migrate quite often through the area, and they're making these cattle paths. And ecologically, it's a nice addition because you have some open ground. It's interesting for bees, for lizards, for snakes. But as I mentioned before, the Veluwe zone is a quite it's an area where a lot of recreation take place. It's one of the most well-known places to go walking. People see these little cattle paths as normal hiking routes, and as an effect, they are disturbing quite some of the area of heathland. So we had to put little signs all over. It's ugly to put signs everywhere, but it was much needed to get rid of these recreational of these walkers in the heathland. So some side effects, we had to deal with them. So as of today, in 2023, we are grazing in an even bigger area than before. Roughly 3,000 hectares are grazed by roughly 160 cows, and I say roughly because it's quite difficult in this area to find all the cows. We try to count them during the winter every month, and the latest count was 160 cows. And on the more southern part, in the white outlined area, it's roughly 500 hectares big. There are precisely 51 horses grazing. And this picture also shows us our managing types, how we try to manage our nature. And you can see that most of the parts in the yellow outlined area has this greenish bluish color. And this is the way we are managing this land is quite unique. It's a bit the same as the Oostvaardersplassen. And we try to manage this as a virtual natural landscape in which we want to let natural processes take place as much as possible. So we put in some animals who can control the area, but besides of cutting down some small seedlings in the heathland, we're not doing that much. We just try to give the best conditions in order to give nature back its own role in managing this area. And in a very populated landscape of Holland, this kind of management is quite rare. And also, it's quite difficult to keep this type of management still going on, because we've got a lot of effects of drought, of nitrogen deposition, and this makes it sometimes quite difficult to get the most out of nature by not doing that much. So it's sometimes difficult to manage this kind of terrain by just literally doing nothing. But the cows are doing their job. Yes.
5 minutes left. Yep. 5 minutes left.
Yes, I'm almost done. Yes, thank you. And now I'm to talk to you about some of the effects. And a really fun thing to see is the difference in terrain use between cows and bulls. On the right picture, you can see a distribution map at a specific moment of all the cows. All the yellow dots are cows, and you see some concentrations, and all these larger concentrations are on former farmlands. And these groups consist mostly female cows or just cows and their youngsters. And all the individual dots are the bulls, because of course there is a limited time that they are interfering with each other, but most of the time the bulls are grazing at some complete different places than the female cows. So where you get somehow overgrazed areas of the farmland, you see a nicely how do you call it? The bulls are not are exploring the rest of the area, so you get a nice even grazing of the entire area. And by grazing, they not only grazing, they use solitary trees to rest under. Of course, they poop over there, and these places are getting a little bit enriched. The vegetation is reacting on it, and within this grazing area of the cows, you have some more diversity because of how the cows are using the landscape. Also, some small pads they're making in the heathland. The bulls are making this boo pits when they are during spring or late winter. Testosterone is really high, and they are making this pits, and these pits are a nice addition to the heathland vegetation. Another aspect of the Highlanders are their shyness, because they are not shy, not at all. And this is in contrast with the other grazes in our area, such as red deer. in the background, you can see a picture of a satellite with a satellite color of a GPS color of a red deer. And if you look closely, they don't like hanging around near busy paths. So all the lines are working paths and paths that visitors can use. And most of the time they are in the middle of these forest patches. The red deer are not grazing everywhere in our park, but the Highlanders, in contrast, are using the more grazy parts near the footpaths or cyclist paths, because it's sometimes nutritious. And some clams from making these pots are giving some nutritions to the grassland. So it's a nice place for them to feed. So in the end, we got a very even distribution of grazing in the area, and each grazer has its own part in where to graze. I will go a little bit quicker because of this. These effects on the landscape you also see near waterholes. Waterholes are essential for the cows, of course, during hot summers. And if you look on the satellite image, you can see the kind of effect they have when they're walking towards these waterholes. And these places, they are interfering with each other. So the bulls are scraping the ground open. They use these little trees to scrape their belly or their skin. So you see a lot of variation near these waterholes. And also effect you can see from high up are their migration routes, because they are like the horses are also migrating from a specific place they like to another, and they're using the same paths. And as a effect of it, you can see these routes from high up. And another nice example of the effect of these routes they are continuously making is on the picture you see a Scotch pine, and there are a lot of seedlings around the tree. But because of this tree is near a migration route, and every time the cows are passing it by, they're eating a little bit of those seedlings. So they keep the pressure of seedlings dominating the heathland pretty low, at least on this place. In this place, so that's another nice effect of the highland cows in this area. And also a quite rare species, at least on the Veluwe, mudgrass, Narda stricta. It's reoccurred along this migration route because of the it's more open. This mudgrass can grow up there, but they don't like this mudgrass actually, so they don't eat it. But it's a nice thing that the species can expand. So the title where I begin with is grazing a motor for diversity. Our conclusion so far is that it can be. It brings quite some new habitats around. This provides new opportunities for all different kinds of plants that were got lost before because of the domination of just a few species. So we're still learning what all these effects are, but so far we are very happy with our grazing, and hopefully we can continue this way of grazing in the next few years. And for now, this was the end. And as the slide shows, I hope to see you at the Veluwe Zone during the grazing tour, because then we are going to visit some of the places I mentioned in the presentation, and then you can see it by your own eyes. So thank you for listening, and maybe there's some time to answer a question.
Thank you very much, Ruben. That was very interesting. And thank you also for the invitation for the May moment. Someone told me that it might be in this period, it might be the issue that you will become a parent for the first time. So I'm not sure if you will be there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, But I've got a lot of colleagues who can accompany your tour, so that won't be a problem.
Okay, okay. There are a lot of questions came in. We won't answer them all, but I'd like to invite you. Maybe you can look over them, and maybe you can answer some of them in the Q&A.
Oh yes.
Yeah, but I want to highlight one of the questions to you. That is because a lot of questions are related to density of grazing in relation to number of cows per hectare, number of horses per hectare, etc. But the question of Justas Gulbinas is, are there no restrictions for grazing in the forest land in the Netherlands?
In terms of the density of grazes, I think.
Yeah, or maybe the damage to trees, or
no, of course, this is an interesting story, and it is something that we're talking over and over. Of course, you have places where there's more grazing, and there are places where there's less grazing. So sometimes, if you look at a specific spot in the forest, you see hardly any new sprouts coming up. Because this is in a place where the cows are mainly feeding. But if you take a look, for example, a kilometer further, you can see a lot of trees are sprouting over there. So the nice thing about having such a big nature reserve in terms of Holland is that there are places there where there is some sprouting of trees, and there are places that are a little bit more attractive to grazing and where you can see less. But in the end, yeah, I think it's not a very big deal. And if you gave it some time, and that is an important thing, we have to be patient and yeah, try to let the system do their job. And I think in the end, we have a nice diversity of places that are grown by trees and more open areas. So, and as far as I know, there are, in terms of grazing by Highlanders or Highlandic cows, are not any restrictions in how many cows you can have, as far as I know.
Okay, thank you very much, Ruben. And I would like to invite you to take a look at the questions in the chat and or not in Q&A session. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
Then we will move over to the next presenter, which is Perry Cornelissen. Welcome, Perry. There you are. Yep.
Hello.
Perry is an expert in the Netherlands on grazing and connected to several research studies in different places, but mainly to the famous Oostvaardersplassen, which is one of the most famous areas in Europe related to grazing. A lot of interesting experience we learned in the past decades, and also the recent years are very interesting, I think, where the politics are trying to interfere with the management. So we are looking forward to your story, Perry. So the floor is yours.
Yes. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to try to share my screen. Yes. Again, good morning, everybody. My name is Perry Cornelissen. I'm an ecologist working for Staatsbosbeheer. Staatsbosbeheer, just like Natuurmonument, is one of the organizations in the Netherlands that manage large nature reserves. And Staatsbosbeheer is managing the Oostvaardersplassen nature reserve. I'm doing monitoring and research there already for a long time. And I want to show you some of the results, and as Harm already told, how politics and public opinion changed the management of the Oostvaardersplassen. Oh, now it's... It's not going to change right now. How is that possible? Oh yeah, there he is. Okay, first of all, because I think not everybody knows where the Oostvaardersplassen are situated in the Netherlands. So in the central part of the Netherlands, where we have these large lakes, Lake IJsselmeer, and some of the new polders that were made in the past century. In one of these polders, Zuidelijk Flevoland, the Oostvaardersplassen is situated. It is situated in the lowest part of the polder, and it was not the intention to have a nature reserve over there. It was meant to be an industrial area between the cities of Lelystad and Almere, but nature decided different, and a wetland emerged within 2 years. And when everybody saw all these birds coming to this wetland, they said, well, maybe a wetland is better than an industrial area, and so the Oostvaardersplassen was born. The Oostvaardersplassen, it's a wetland of international importance for breeding and it's a breeding and foraging area for migrating birds that migrate from the northern parts of Europe and migrate to even Africa, Southern Africa even. And Oostvaardersplassen is part of this large lake district. And this large lake district is a very important stopping over site for migrating birds to rest or feed over there. And the Oostvaardersplassen is also an important breeding area for birds that migrate to southern parts, stay there during winter, and come back in summertime to breed in the Oostvaardersplassen. So the Oostvaardersplassen is famous for its bird diversity and many different wetland birds, but also famous for the large numbers of birds that visit the Oostvaardersplassen during winter. And those are golden plovers, lapwings, and different geese species. But also, Oostvaardersplassen is, of course, very famous for its large herbivores. These very large herds that were there in the past, they are not here anymore, but they were there in the past, and many people from all over the world came to the Oostvaardersplassen to visit the Oostvaardersplassen and see what happened at the Oostvaardersplassen, these enormous large numbers of herbivores that were grazing in this area. Well, the aim of grazing has always been to create a diverse landscape, especially a wetland landscape. You can see a diagram over here, and this was the idea that we have open water, water with vegetation, grasslands, but also forest, all together in this wetland. And for Staatsbosbeheer, the management goal, especially for the Oostvaardersplassen, but also for other areas, is that we try to give room for natural processes as much as possible. And these natural processes are energy and nutrient cycles, water level dynamics, erosion, sedimentation, but also herbivory. So that's what our goal, and that's what we try to do also at the Oostvaardersplassen. And in the Oostvaardersplassen, water level dynamics, sedimentation, erosion, and herbivory are one of the most important natural processes to shape this landscape. And again, you can see this diagram, and now you can see the effect of herbivory, high grazing pressure and low grazing pressure, and also the water level dynamics, wet areas and dry areas. And all together, you get all kinds of gradients between heavily grazed and not so heavily grazed areas, and wet and dry areas. And so these, based on that, you can get all kinds of gradients, and that means that you have a high diversity in your landscape with all kinds of different habitats, which can be used by all kinds of different species of birds, but also insects and small mammals and amphibians, etc. So this always has been the idea of introducing grazing in this area, because if you would not graze this area, it probably would have become a forested area, and then you wouldn't have these grassland vegetation, which are very important, for example, for geese or lapwings of golden plover. So to achieve this goal, and to give room for natural processes, we introduced water level dynamics. We are in a polder, so the water level is controlled in the polder. And to get water level dynamics in the area, you have to do something about that. So we created the possibilities to have some water level dynamics. But also we had to do something about the natural gradient between a wet and dry area. On the bottom, you can see two transects. The transect above is a gradient from dry on the right side to wet on the left side in a natural situation where you have the wetland on the right side and the lake on the left side. And then you have gradually the surface level is going down, and so you get more water. And there is also an area where you have that's always dry on the right side, and then you get an area that is periodically wet in wintertime when the water is high, and then you have an area that's always in the water. But the Oostvaardersplassen, if you look at the transect at the bottom, it's totally different. On the left side, there is the large lake, and then we have a dike that separates the lake from the polder. And on the right side of the dike, there is the polder, which is, there's no water anymore, and the surface level is more or less the same as the lake bottom. But directly on the right side of the dike, there is the Oostvaardersplassen. And you can see the water over there. But you can see next to the wetland, the dry area is much lower than the wetland. So it's totally the opposite from a natural situation. And we wanted to have this gradient from wet to dry in the wetland itself. So we had to make, we had to take some measures to get this gradient. And within the Oostvaardersplassen, we made a small embankment to keep the wetland wet. And we also had to put some wires in the dry area to have a higher groundwater level. So we get this gradient from wet to dry. To get the process of herbivory in the area, we had to introduce large herbivores. The Oostvaardersplassen is isolated from other areas where large herbivores are, so we had to introduce them. And in 1983 and 1984, we introduced cattle and horses, and in 1992, we introduced reptile. As I told before, without large herbivores, the area probably would have been covered by shrubs and trees. And so we wouldn't have these other habitats that are very important for wetland birds, like grasslands and other vegetation types. It's important to know that there are no large predators in the area and that the area is fenced off. So it's isolated and there is no migration of large herbivores in or out the Oostvaardersplassen. Again, so the idea is to create a diverse landscape according to the woodland grassland cycles, although at that time the theory of woodland grassland cycles was not put on the paper, right? But the idea was the same, and later on this idea was put in papers by Van Spira, as it says that large herbivores do have an effect on the landscape, and they can create openness in the forested landscape. Depending on the number of large herbivores. If you have a lot of large herbivores, then they can create openness in the forested areas. And when the population is decreasing because of a disease or whatever, then there will be opportunities for shrubs and trees to establish in these grasslands. And then a scrub can establish, and within the scrub, you can have trees that are protected by thorny shrubs. And so you end up in a forested area again. And based on this cycle of population dynamics, you have a cycle in this landscape of woodland and pastures. And so on a long time scale and on a large landscape scale, you always have somewhere grassland and somewhere forest and somewhere you are in between. So you have a diverse landscape. So this was the idea behind it. Well, grazing started in 1983, so we have a very long period to see what happened at the Oostvaardersplassen and see if this diverse landscape was emerging. We monitored many things at the Oostvaardersplassen, for example, the population dynamics. And here you can see three graphs of the population dynamics. The left one is the total population numbers of the red deer, conic horses, and hack cattle, and also the total number of large herbivores is presented in this graph. And you can see that from the beginning, the populations increased exponentially. And after a certain period, the maximum numbers of animals was reached, which is about 3,500 animals from 2009. And these animals, the numbers were determined by the food supply, the severity of winter, and the competition between the animals. So there was no culling and there was no supplemental feeding at that time. And this is what happened in this area. And it's a very rich area. And because of that, the numbers were very high. It was about more than 2 animals per hectare, which is very high. Right of this graph, you can see winter mortality and birth. And what we saw is that winter mortality is a percentage of the total population. Winter mortality increased. Most of the animals died during winter because of food shortage. And so about 30 to 40% sometimes of the animals died during winter because of food shortage. If we look at birth as a percentage, we can see that birth decreased a little bit, but not so much. The animals still, even if the situation is less good for them, they still go on giving birth to But what you see, and it's not in this graph, is that the survival of calves and foals is decreasing when there are more animals in the area. We also look at the vegetation development in this area, and every 4 years we make a vegetation map, which is not about the species composition, but it's about the structural types. So it's about grasslands, about tall herb vegetation, reed vegetation, and shrubs and trees. And what we can see here is 2 maps of the Oostvaardersplassen area in 1996 and 2016. And you can see that the top part of the vegetation map is a little bit misty because that is the marsh. And where you have these bright colors, that's the area where the large herbivores graze. They can go into the marsh, but they mostly stay in the grazed area, in the dry area, where you have the bright colors. And you can see this big difference between 1996 and 2016. In 1996, you can see that there's a lot of red color and brown color and black color, which are tall herbs and reed vegetation. The black color is shrubs and trees. And these structural types completely disappeared in 2016, and the area is dominated by short grazed grasslands. On the right side, you can see 2 pictures, one in 1996, where you have all these different structural types. So you have grassland, and you have tall herbs, and reed vegetation, and shrubs and trees present. And the photograph on the bottom is the same area, only in 2016, and all the shrubs and trees have gone. There are some trees left, but that's because the herbivores don't like to eat these trees. So these are birches. Here again, some pictures of the area between 1996 and 2016. The top pictures we already have seen. The middle ones is about the structure of the grasslands itself. In 1996, you can see in the grasslands there are still some tall herbs present. And if you look in 2016 on the right side, it's a very short grazed grassland. And on the average height of the grassland changed from 20 centimeters in 1996 to about less than 8 centimeters in 2016. So the grasslands became also more homogeneous. It's all the same height, no diversity anymore. And the bottom 2 pictures show the effect of large herbivores on the shore vegetation of water bodies. On the left side, you can see reed vegetation in the water bodies. And on the right side, you can see a water body where the reed vegetation completely disappeared and only bare soil. Nothing wrong with bare soil, because it also is a habitat that's very important for wetland birds. But if all the water bodies have bare soil, then for some bird species it's not attractive anymore, and they won't visit the area anymore. We also monitor bird diversity. Here you have some information on the breeding birds in the grazed area. Again, the vegetation maps in 1996 and 2016, and below the vegetation maps, there are maps of the breeding birds. And every black dot is a breeding bird pair. And then you can see the breeding birds in 1997 and the breeding birds in 2016. And I don't have to explain what the effect is of the change in vegetation. You can see immediately there are many, there are less black dots in 2016. Many bird species disappear, but also the bird breeding numbers are lower. On the right side, you have this graph where you have the bars that shows the breeding birds species diversity, and the black line is the number of breeding birds, which is decreasing.
Ready?
Yeah.
5 minutes left.
Yeah. Okay. So these were the development until 2018, and in 2018 something changed. Already for a long time there was some political concern and social resistance, but it culminated in 2016 and 17 when the resistance became more severe also. And I mean that the rangers were intimidated by people. And in 2017, the province of Flevoland, who is responsible for the management of the Oostvaardersplassen, for the nature goals, but also for animal health, asked a commission to give an advice on the management of the Oostvaardersplassen. And in 2018, a new policy framework for the management of the Oostvaardersplassen was made. And this changed a lot in the management of the Oostvaardersplassen. And the main goals in the policy framework is to do something about the Natura 2000 measures, room for experienced nature, but most important in the management of the large herbivores, the welfare of the large herbivores has to be better, because as I showed you, 30 to 40% of the animals died because of food shortage. And this was part of the political and societal, social concern. And also, it's about creating a diverse landscape, as it always was meant to be, but it didn't develop in the past years. So, in order to increase animal health and also to do something about a diverse landscape, the advice was to reset the large herbivores. And I showed you the graphs that we had about 3,500 animals in the past years, and we should reduce them to 1,100 to give room for a diverse landscape and to have a better animal health. And for animal welfare, we had to do something about supplemental feeding in wintertime when the body condition is too low. We have to feed them hay, and we also had to create shelter by planting shrubs and trees in the area. No, so the management changed. On the top, you can see the graph of the population numbers, and you can see from 2018 that the numbers are already lower. We are still working at it to reach the number of 1,100 animals. We're not yet there. But we already see some effects of the lower numbers of large herbivores. Again, the map of 2016, and now we also have a map of 2021, and we already can see that the vegetation structure is changing. We can see that some of the water bodies are getting shore vegetation again, and we also can see that the grassland is changing from very short grazed grasslands and to more diverse lands, grasslands. Not only that tall herbs can grow to higher, so they can have more height, but what we also can see, and you can see this, there are some yellow dots in the grasslands, and that means that also herbs start to flower again. When you have these very high numbers of large herbivores, you have herbs, but they don't flower anymore. And also the breeding birds, they already show an increase again in 2022 because of the change in the habitat. So for today and the future, the aim still is creating a diverse landscape, but by controlling the numbers of animals, and we have to do something about health and welfare. What's coming up in the next years is genetic diversity, because we have an isolated population. The starting population was very small, so we have to look into genetic diversity. What does that mean for this population in the future? And another thing that is going to happen, wolves are close by to the Oostvaardersplassen. It's about 20 kilometers. The population of wolves in the Netherlands is increasing, so we will expect the wolf within a few years. And that will be a new chapter in the management of the Oostvaardersplassen, because then we will experience what wolves are going to do with the population dynamics. And maybe in future we don't have to cull the animals anymore, because the wolf is there and is going to control the large herbivore numbers. So that was my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer some of your questions.
Well, thank you very much, Perry. It was an intriguing presentation, and also a lot of lessons learned after, well, 40 years of research almost. And that's what I always like about the Oostvaardersplassen, that there's a lot of research connected to, maybe you would have liked more research, but I still think it's excellent. One question from the chat is, or from the Q&A button is, from Bill Grayson: what is the overall carrying capacity of the Oostvaardersplassen in terms of livestock units, cows per hectare? Well, I think you touched upon that.
Yes, exactly, because our monitor shows that in total about 3,500 animals were there, and it's not more, so then it starts to fluctuate. It doesn't say anything about how many cattle you can have, because then you have to calculate this, and you have to transform a red deer into a unit of cattle, and then you can come up with how many cattle you could have in this area. That's possible, and maybe you could have about 1,000 or 1,200 cattle in this area if you only have cattle. But our monitoring shows that you can calculate the capacity of the area, the Oostvaardersplassen, for animals, but then also you know what kind of landscape you have, because and then everything will be short-grazed grassland.
Yeah. Well, there are some more questions. Maybe you can look at them in the chat, and but I also think we can, in the end, during the Q&A session, have a bit of discussion more.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Perry.
You.
So maybe before going to the next speaker, it's good to tell you that in from 9 to 11 May, we have the Eurosite grazing study tour together with Natuurmonumenten and State Forestry Management. We start in the Oostvaardersplassen, and later on we will go to the Veluwe Zoom and then to other areas in the Netherlands where grazing is part of the management. So please check the Eurosite website in case you're interested for the program, and yeah, if you're interested to join, please don't hesitate to register. So then we go to Poland. Casimir, maybe you can turn on your camera and can't see you yet. Yeah, there you are. Welcome in our midst. Very happy that you're here. Casimir Rabski from the Polish Society for the Coast, already in a long-term twinning cooperation with Natuurmonumenten and twinning between the Netherlands and Poland, sharing experiences. You will tell us more about the Oder-Delta National Park and Wolin National Park, areas that we will visit during the Polish grazing study tour, which is currently planned for the end of September. More news will be shown on the Eurosite website as soon as we can. But Casimir, the floor is yours, and please tell us your story.
Thank you. Good afternoon already to everybody, because we're just after the second part of the day. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to be with you. Well, I'm founder and the initiator of most of the activities connected to Society for the Coast, established in '96. And I would like to share with you the two experiences we have. First will be connected with the grazing animals on the area of the Wolyński National Park, but at the moment I lost it. So maybe Wojtek, you will support me with this, because something wrong with my computers at the moment. Well, I'm still a very old-fashionable. Thank you, Wojtek. I'm very still fashionable man, so I still prefer the post pigeon than the email. So, but well, okay. On behalf of my friend Marek Delawerski, who was not able to join this meeting, I would like to show you something and give you some experience about the grazing in Wolyń National Park. So it will be just a presentation which is rather welcome to the September visit to Poland, but also there are some interesting problems and stories they have with this grazing. So if you look for the next one slide, here you see where we are. We are both working in the Odra Delta, the estuary of Odra. So it's the northwest Poland. It's the area of the great lagoon of Szczecin Lagoon and the coast of the other side. So Wolyński National Park is located in the very modern landscape created just after the period of glaciation, with the modern and very interesting modern processes and existing processes which have also a very big impact from the vegetation and for the habitat situation. So if you look for the next one, please. We see that Wolyń National Park is established in March 1996 to protect over the 10,000 hectares as various mosaic land ecosystems in the very unique landscape, island landscape of Odra estuary. So Wolyń National Park is located on the 2,000 small islands with forest ecosystem more than 4,600 hectares, aquatic ecosystem including the water, which has also more than 4,000 hectares, and non-forest ecosystems about 1,600 hectares. Active protection is relied on above 610 hectares, with grazing on 440 hectares. So it depends on the mosaic landscape of the ecosystem, and the grazing is combined with the very unique systems of this coastal area. Because first of all, we must remember this is the coastal area of Polish Baltic Sea. So a little more about the Wolyński National Park. Active protection is concentrate mostly on the semi-narrow habitats, grassland, salt marshes. We come back to that because it's very important, very important facts of the Wolyń National Park, rushes and dry grasslands. More of this very interesting and mosaic area is located on the southern part of Wolyń, special in the rivers delta of Swina River. You see the photos. That is former canals, estuary of Odra River, connecting water from about 60% of catchment of Polish water, and this very old-fashioned system of traveling, of transportation materials, actually is used by the main channel connecting this estuary to the Baltic Sea. Well, can I ask for more? Yeah. The history of the richness of this semi-natural habitats has always happened with the story of the mankind living here. The islands has been used for agriculture for the 16th century, so the 17th century, extensively during the Second World War. Numerous users, mosaic crops, and very intensive took place during the state farming system between the 60s and 80s. So we have about more than 1,000 head of cattle there, which is far too much. The last farmer and very old lady from the Przytur, the originally left there before the war, grazed goats and sheep until 94. From that time, for more than 10 years, was no grazing or mowing on the island, what means this recolonization of the island by Rees, Sedges Association, what means, of course, using the natural richness. What will be the same in Odra Delta Nature Park in my area, you must know that the most of this area was occupied, let's say, in scopes by the Soviet type of the agriculture kolkhoz system, which was not taking care of anything about the nature, but very intensive exploitation of the area. What means at the end of the day, they're losing the natural effects in mostly of the all wetland and meadows and pasturous areas located in this estuary of the catchment of Odra River. So what has happened next? So the main task to protection were to improve the condition and increasing the habitats of the area, coming back to the natural system of this, and in other words, to prepare this area, to prepare the scope again for the valuable avifauna lost before, as aquatic warbler, dunlin, lapwings, redshank, curlew, and the other birds. So the management of Wolniski National Park decided, please next one, decided to realize this very ambitious program by starting the active protection by mowing preliminary and grazing as a very important conservation tool. On 4 islands of the Svina River, so it's the back delta, about 440 hectares, they decided to make this mowing and grazing, as I told, and for some thermophilic grasslands and meadows in the Volins, the big area, about 5 hectares coming back to the very old-fashioned system. And well, on the Volin split, also 2,000 hectares under the active management. So if you look for the next one, you will see that the return for the grazing was started from the removal of the old reed biomass, and the grazing has been started in 2008. From the very beginning, grazing is based on the cooperation with the farmer, and this farmer, I mentioned his name is Alfred Smolczyński. He says, I think it's the best farmer who is connecting the grazing, because the mowing of the reeds and the aquatic warbler is the only place of him, not in the island, when there are still aquatic warbler existing in Northwest Poland. So for the managing the area, had to be done a long-term agreement to realize this ambitious aspects on this island. In some area, it was unique conditions. We got some salt on the plains coming from the evaporation of the water. We will maybe a little bit come back to this a little later. So if you look for the next one slide, you will see what has happened as an organization point of view. The island or the farmers has been realized by preparing the background for the activity, build shells, fences, and what is very important, he had to adapt that the Burgess boat has been necessary to transport cattle to the islands. That is absolutely unique. I don't know, that probably not only in Poland, standard solution on the transportation and having the contact with the island. There's still a couple of boats still good working and adapted from the military equipment. So the island has been prepared for using the grazing animals. And please next one, Wojtek, thank you very much also for that. So the grazing is covers about 370 hectares, and there are several breeds with the most important limousine cattle. Every year in May, but it depends of course of the weather, 200 to 250 cattle, beef and dairy breeds are transported to the islands, and grazing takes place in the quarters. So to protect the breeding birds in the special areas. Usually in November, beginning of November, the cows are taken out from the island again on this luxury boat. We are using to say, but also using making some film productions as Queen Mary for the boats with the sex for the activities on the island. So it's kind of the I thought the elections time for the they like it. So this, I noticed that also that they are not against this kind of transportation. They are not frightened about. So that's from technical point of view looking like that. And on next one, please. So of course, the grazing of the islands had some problems. First of all, uniquely difficult logistic conditions. Of course, low economic effectiveness, and difficult with the availability of the cattle is also noticed, and the agri-environment schema has been not adapted to the local condition, and that is not problem for the Wolyński National Park. There's also a problem for other areas that this agri-environment schema is not according to the real conditions we should have in some areas. Sometimes the problems with the mobility of the cattle. They are crossing from one to the other island, and especially the low water. Sometimes it had to be catched from the quite a lot of area, and opposite the flooding of Iceland. Sometimes needs to bring food or taking cows away from the island if the water is very high. So there are some problems, but still that is very big and good effects of this activities. Can I ask for the next one, please? So about 300 hectares of the salt marshes has been saved. And I think at the moment, the salt marshes, that is the biggest and the best complex of this habitat in Poland, and probably one of the largest still existing in natural conditions in the Baltic Sea. Of course, maintenance of the biotopes, what means the increasing number of the birds like lapwings, redshank, gray-legged goose, shelducks, and many other, and maintaining the area as an optimal area for the aquatic warbler biotop. And something new on the map, creating a new tourist attraction, trips on the solar boat to see cows on the island and to hear the story, what is very important from the education point of view. On the next slide, the next slide, you will see also the other grazing, small but important from the experience coming from the thermophilus grassland on the island on the south part of Wolyński National Park, and this part is mowed in scope by goats. This is just beginning, but this is based on the historical use of this difficult to cultivate areas, and with the good results for some very interesting species of the flora. So, but that's the beginning of the situation. I think that's the most important facts connected with the recovering or recreating the area for the nature management. So I think that's at the beginning the most important information about the area you will see, and that about possibilities to discussion about this how that's going on. So if I see the question, I would like to answer for the question at the end, or if not, I will answer for the right, but I think it is different.
Thanks for this presentation. Can you move to your second presentation on the Oder-Delta National Park?
Okay. Well, we are still on the area of the estuary of Odra River, the similar landscape to the landscape we've seen before, but in another type, because it's Odra Delta Nature Park belongs to Society for the Coast, and the southern part of the coast, which was also usually formerly for the agriculture. If you look for the next one, please, I see. Okay. So some words about the Society for the Coast. That is a small organization realizing the active nature protection, raising awareness of the importance of the Baltic Sea, and the other, maybe for the next one will be easier to translate to give you some information about my society. So again, please go to the next one. What is very important, our society is one of the few non-governmental organizations which combines many aspects of active nature protection based on own lands in the coastal of the Station Lagoon with aspects of sustainable development, education, tourism, as well as local inhabitants' participation, which is after the 89, when we have the change of the transformation plan, very important to involve the people. For many of them, that's the new land because of the after Second World War, as you know, the boundaries of Poland did completely change. So that's our activities, and our activities, Wojtek, please, they are implementing the principle of active nature conservation on owned and managed area. That is the most important point. But also we are realizing and we are doing activities, other activities, if you see for the next one, that are connected with the comprehensive natural education, extremely important based on our area, and extremely important for the people who are not only living in this area, but would like to visit this unique landscape. And the other aspects and the other purpose of our activities is, please one, is connected with the cooperation, as I mentioned, local communities, and creating platform for understanding between everybody who has something to do and working and the environment and sensitivity area, means in this area and Natura 2000 area. So we are also cooperating in many aspects with the national, hello, please, the next one, national and international, with a special attention to Eurosite, which society is a member from the beginning of the existence of 96. But also we are very happy to cooperate with Naturmonumenten, RSPB, Coastal and Marine Office, UCC, but also we are very close cooperate with the Polish Coastal National Parks, Wolyński National Park and Słowicki National Park, when I am the member of the advisory, the scientific advisory board and working for some projects. So that is our activities, yes?
As we have 5 minutes left.
Sorry?
5 minutes left.
5 minutes, okay, so I'll try to do my best. Thanks to Eco Protection Fund, we approximately bought 1,000 hectares of valuable area of Station Lagoon. On next please one, that I'm very going shortly. We are creating and we established the Odra Delta Nature Park. Hello, yeah, I think 4,000 hectares in together with the cooperation between our Society for the Coast, Maritime Office, Forest, and cooperation with the community of Stepnica and Wolin, as a model area to implementing the principles of the Natura 2000 network. So what we started to do on the purchase and meadows and pasturages, largely wet, which has been used for over 20 years after the communist state farming system, and they were heavily overgrown by reeds and bushes. We decided at the beginning of 21st century, in the beginning of 2002-2004, to introduce, after the first mowing, the large herbivores, coney horses, and Scottish Highlanders. Approximately at the moment we have 300 animals, and they are living free on the area of the 600 hectares of the meadows located in the eastern part of the Station Lagoon. Please one next, where maybe I'll just leave the interesting information about Scottish Highland, what is mentioned by the professors from the Polish Academy of Science and University, Professor Wojciech Kamecki found that is the first mentioned on this area in 12th century, and archaeological evidence also the probably 6th century this animal were living. The second animal which has been implemented is the so we first bought 2 from the very old lady who are also doing some management on the area, about 100 kilometers from area. And then we got from Naturmonumenten, from Dutch island Pinheimeden, 15 of them. Then we also bought some, and then we started to realize our project of the grazing on the area. Coney horses. Coney horses, okay, that is the Polish breed. And I thought there will be enough time to tell you in Poland about the story of this, but it's absolutely great. It is a recreation of breeds starting from 1926, 1936, to come back to the very old traditional Polish breed Tarpan. And after Second World War, we start to rebuild everything from the beginning because it was lost and that was just been just only for there. So next one, please. In autumn 2004, we decided to make an absolutely unique situation when we recreate the group of the horses by a rush of driving them or just taking them step by step, 17 horses for buffer zone of Biebrza National Park, which means 700 kilometers by going and traveling, which was accompanied by the radio and television reports and make a very interesting event from the social point of view. And the next 20 horses came from the Netherlands. So actually we have the largest group of the conic horses living in Poland. Actually, we decided to reduce the number because we found that it's a little too much for this area. However, there's very interesting. We have a very interesting information about the behavior of conic, which I left, of course, from the visiting you or maybe just a discussion how they are looking like. So thanks to the activities we started to have after the 20 years of doing nothing of this area. Next one, please, Wojtek, if you don't mind. We are find that is the first and main things of the low grass vegetation, limiting overgrowing or bushing, creating a very important thing, possibility of trampling areas for the high moisture, and enrichment the habitat for many species of birds. So let me just let you know that actually now we have found there is, after these changes of the landscape visuality, and the next one you will see that we have about more than over 140 species have been recorded in the area of our activities during this time. And well, next one, just I think that it is small for this just shortly very well. More than 25 plants communities also has been found after there. And next one, please. Very important thing, that is social effects of grazing. Education, recreation, elements of pro-nature, tourism, and also art inspiration, what we found in the organizing some art camps from the artists, photographers, sculptures, and such like that. And for the local people, very interesting is they can have some income from realizing the pro-natural tourism on the area, looking for the birds, looking for the animals living and free, and having the possibility of studying a little bit with them. So that is, I think this is mostly the conclusions are like we all know, but well, my conclusion is the last one, please. And that is the conclusion which I would like to mention to also you. We also owe horses and cows the richness of bird song. That is something what I like to hear to talk to the people, because that's giving the possibility to understand how important this small or this big herbivores, but two kind of animals has the impact for our habitat. So thank you very much. Again, sorry for technical problems, and hope to welcome you on September 2003 on our beautiful area of estuary of Odra River, when you'll see the Odra Delta Nature Park as well as the Wołyń National Park. Thank you very much.
Mariusz Miotke from OTOP, the BirdLife partner in Poland. Very happy to have you here together with your colleague Bogomila Blaskowska. And welcome in our midst. And please tell us your story about Konik Polski in your area near Gdansk. It is, I think.
Yeah, it's right.
Okay.
So hello everybody, my name is Mariusz Miotke. Like Harms said, I'm working in Polish Society for the Protection of Birds. Short in Polish, it's OTOP. I'm here with my colleagues Bogomila Blaskowska. And I'm working in Beka Nature Reserve, and I will present some grazing stuff from this area. So Beka Nature Reserve is a not so big area, 355 hectares. It's located in north part of Poland, near to Gdańsk or Hel Peninsula, between those two location. Our society started our activities in this area in 1999. And our main goals for our reserve, all our reserve, also in the Karszyborska Kępa near Wolin, is probably the same. So the main is to protect natural habitats that we found in our reserve, protect breeding habitats for aquatic warbler, the very rare species of passerine. We also protect breeding habitats for all species from waters, resting and feeding habitats for migrating and wintering birds. Our job is also to protect the very sensitive areas like Beka Reserve from tourist pressure. And next part of our job is to verifying the effectiveness of our job, that we doing this good, and the raising awareness among visitors and local people around Beka Nature Reserve.
Thank you very much,
Beka
Casimir. Very happy that
we
you
are
succeeded
using
and
active
you could finish your
protection
presentation.
methods.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
the first one is mowing. Of course, it's grazing. Also, it's regulation of water conditions. And about all of them is monitoring of effectiveness. And about this grazing, I'll try to tell something more. So we are grazing almost or just 80 hectares in Beka Nature Reserve. It's divided in 3 parts, and we are not grazing every of this part in the same time. We are changing these areas through the year. So we are starting probably in May in one part, then we try and transport the herd in the second part, and on the end of the year, probably September, October, the third part in the same year. Why we are using grazing? Probably this is the benefits from this activity. So the habitats in Beka Nature Reserve are semi-natural. They are created by grazing, agri-grazing, by rural using. So we are just trying to return to the past when this part of coast was grazing by people, local people. So this is the same way to have this space open. What is the next benefit? It's zoohory, so the seed transport by animals. Because when we started grazing in Beka Nature Reserve, the most of area was covered by cane, reed. So the first part of that was to remove reed from this area, and animals help us with that because they are eating the first on the open space and then try to eat reed and get some poop there, and seeds are located in a new place, thanks that. What is the next benefit? We think it's mowing. So the impact is longer and more durable. So when you just mowing some area, you just get some biomass and get it out. But when you're grazing by animals, the impact is long, and animals working on the structure of the habitats of pasture. And by its work, we are, in our experience, the habitats is more varied. So they are creating physiognomy of habitats more diverse, and it's more appropriate for many other species in such area. So now in Beka Reserve, we have just the herd of Konix horses. They are 14 mares, 11 geldings, and from this year, we have already 2 new foals in our herd. What is the most important thing in our experience to management of grazing in such area like Beka? So the salt meadow, wet ground. So the very first part, first is the period of grazing. In our reserve, we are starting grazing in May, on the beginning of May, and ending this probably the end of November, maybe sometimes beginning of December. Why such period? It depends on water level in reserve. Our reserve is located by Pucka Bay, and every year on the end of winter, put water from the bay coming to reserve, and a whole area is flooded. Sorry, and we have to wait until the water level go down. And the most of all, it's beginning of the May, the half of May, and before the winter, we have to remove our herd from reserve, also because the water, and also because it's lack of food for them in the end of the year. The next part, it's the type of animals. We started with cattle, Limousin or Charolais cattle, and many other breeds of cattle. But now, after many changes in the agri situation, and the cattle is not so often to the agri is changed, so the cattle is probably just for farmers near their farm, and we are trying to do that with other animals. So we choose Konix. What is the next part? It's the number of animals. How many animals you can put on this pasture without any destroys in habitats or breeding population of birds. And the last one is the part more official, so regulation in CAP or agri-environmental payment. Other grazing to have a good time of grazing for animals, so taking care of animal welfare. The most important is to control the number of animals per area, so some sort of density of grazing. Also, we have to prepare for the non-grazing time, so for the winter, because the herd is going out of a reserve and to other place, so we need some food for them. And then the most expensive thing is probably the vet and the blacksmith operation. So like animals, they need some vet from time to time, and they need blacksmith, of course, because on the wet ground, their hoof are often too big, so they need some operation from blacksmith. Now I am presenting you some photos from the beginning of our adventure with grazing. The cows and the conics, one from Beka Nature Reserve and the second one, conics, are from Karsiborska Kępa Nature Reserve. The next one is the Limousin cattle in Beka Nature Reserve. Quite nice herd, but now we are just working with the conics herd, like you see, like you can see in this photo. That's all. Thank you for listening. I hope for some questions.
Thank you very much, Marius. Again, very interesting. I directly have a question, if I may. It's because you have the situation that you receive agri-environmental payments from the Common Agricultural Policy. So what are the issues with that? Is it a large part of the financial management of the area? And are you also restricted because of this, receiving this money, or are you flexible enough?
Yeah, the restriction, the most important part is the restriction. So we have to caring about the density of animals per area, and yeah, that's the one, probably. I don't remember now, sorry for the rest one. But the density of animals per area is the most important.
So if I may ask, so what is the most important guideline? Is it the receiving of the funds, or is it the nature management objectives? Because I can imagine that sometimes it interferes, that you would like to be more flexible because of the nature management objectives, but then you're controlled by the way you have to fulfill the requirements of the Common Agricultural Policy. Is that an issue in your area, or?
No, it's not an issue. It's just challenge, I think. You have to carry about that. It's not so hard for that. You just have to pay attention to all those things together. Just work, you know. I don't know how to say it. Probably.
It's good for now. Thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation. Very interesting area you have there. So if I can invite all the panelists to put on the camera and maybe to mute yourself, then we can go to the questions and answers. And I have to give you a compliment, because you, in the backlog, in the background, you did a lot of good work in answering all these questions. But if you agree, I would like to highlight a few of which I think are very interesting and relevant questions from the people attending. And welcome to Patrick Nuvelstein from Natuurmonumenten, who is, I think, maybe the main initiator of this whole idea of trying to organize a grazing study tour series. So I think a lot of questions are already answered, and we cannot answer all of the questions, but a lot of questions have to do with the decisions on the number of cattle, herbivores, I should say, in the different areas. And everybody makes a kind of decision on, it's kind of management decision, of course, and maybe also financially or very practical decision. So I would like to hear from you, if possible, what kind of factors are influencing your decision? And especially for you, Ruben, I'll try to start with you.
Yes.
Yeah. So because there's a question also how the numbers of herbivores are controlled in the Veluwe area, and how do you come to your decisions? Yeah.
Yeah, there are actually two aspects in this matter. We have the herds of domestic cattle, actually, so the Highland cows and Icelandic horses, and we have a population of wild boars, red deer, and that kind of animals. And let's begin with the cows. We manage the population only by taking out the weak or the not healthy animals that are really suffering. A vet is coming every month to check them, and if we see some animals that are not going to survive the next month, we take them out by shooting. The horses are managed more by ourselves. We have some areas where we can put the horses in a smaller fenced area, and the deer are also controlled by shooting. And we're not making the decision of shooting by ourselves. The province of Gelderland is the authority that gives us the number of deers we have to shoot. So we're not in control by ourselves in those numbers which we're allowed to shoot. So it's it's a mixture of all kinds of rules and regulations we have to take care of. But I think the most important thing is the number of Highland cows that are the most, how you say, we controlling them on the lowest grade of control. The population is just slowly increasing. Only a few animals each year are letting the population grow, but of course, this is still a big discussion also in relation to forest development, because a lot of our forest is struggling of drought and nitrogen. So we're doing some research with some small enclosures in which parts we have no grazing at all. Not by deer, and some areas that are grazed by cattle or deer, and it's still an ongoing process which we're trying to try to master in which way we can let this area develop itself.
Thank you. It sounds like a learning by doing exercise here.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Patrick, if you would add.
Yes, maybe I can add that in the Dutch two speeches, we talked about the Oostvaardersplassen and the Veluwe zone. And it's very interesting to see that the problems in the Oostvaardersplassen with the population dynamics were that big because it's such a fertile area. And we at the Veluwe zone, we are in a quite relaxed situation where, well, of course, it's not that fertile. It's like Ruben said, it's sandy soils. So our problem is also, because of the circumstances, different. And I think that all the sites that we will visit have special impact on the way we have to manage our cattle because of where they are located and what's the richness of the soil.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I think it's a good bridge to Perry, to the Oostvaardersplassen, if I may. I think because, hey, you decided in a new policy, there was decided that 1100 as a number of total herbivores is a good striving value to go back to the more diverse landscape. What's your opinion on that?
So the first question was, what determines the number of large herbivores? And of course, that is the goal for the area. and it always has been a diverse landscape. And we hoped and we expected that not controlling the large herbivore numbers, that this diverse landscape would emerge, but it didn't. And so the goal is still the diverse landscape, because we want to have habitats for all these different kinds of bird species that visit the Oostvaardersplassen. And so we experienced that not controlling large herbivores in an area that is not a complete ecosystem, and I explained that to you, then you have to do something about these large herbivore numbers. And also it's about rewilding. Rewilding for me is having natural processes in an area that should be there, you know, under natural conditions. The Oostvaardersplassen is a fenced-off area. That's one thing which is a problem for the natural process of migrating. So the animals cannot go from the Oostvaardersplassen to other areas if they don't want to live in the Oostvaardersplassen. But also other herbivores cannot come to the Oostvaardersplassen. There is no large predator, which we now are going to understand what the effect of large predators is on large herbivore populations. So that's another thing. The Oostvaardersplassen is a wetland, and water level dynamics do have a major impact on the area that will be flooded in wintertime. In the Oostvaardersplassen, we control the water level, which means that there is always a certain amount of dry area. And this has an impact on the population dynamics. In a natural wetland, you can have a year where 80 or 90% of the area will be flooded, and then there is no room for large herbivores. So it will have an effect on the population dynamics. In the Oostvaardersplassen, it's not a complete system, and because of that, I think that is why we had also these very high numbers of large herbivores. Also because it's a very productive area, but also because it's not complete system, you end up with a very high number of large herbivores, and then you will have a kind of landscape which emerged naturally because the herbivores were there. But I think it's not the natural landscape when it would be a complete landscape with all the other natural processes. And therefore, I think if you have a large area that is not complete, and you have a certain goal, which is a diverse landscape or biodiversity or whatever, you have to control the large herbivores. Otherwise, you end up in a totally different system. Maybe you like that system, but if the goal is diversity, then it's not the right thing to do. And then you have to control the large herbivore numbers. We go back to 1100 because we actually do not know what the right number is. But we know from the past that when we were having 1100 animals in the area, then we had a diverse landscape, and there was kind of a balance between the number of shrubs and trees that were eaten and died, and the number of trees, the new trees that established in the area. So there was a kind of a balance between these mortality and establishment to keep this diverse landscape. So we go back to the 1100, but we are going to monitor to see if 1100 is the right number or not. And we will see this in the next 5 or 10 years. And maybe we need more animals or maybe less animals. And also the wolf will enter the Oostvaardersplassen within a few years. And then we have a totally different situation than we have now.
Thank you, Perry. That's a very clear answer. And it would be also interesting to see if the connection opportunities in the future will also improve. That's also very relevant, I think. And then the same question for the Polish colleagues, like Casimir and Marius, the relationship between the number of cattle and herbivores and the bird densities and the biodiversity. Is this an issue in your? How do you come to the decisions here?
Yes. Well, if you hear me,
yep.
If you hear me, well, that was very good said. Is learning by doing. I think there's no one proper answer for Europe about the density of animals, grazed animals, and the local conditions of the soils, of the water system. In our situation, we decided just to keep it free from the beginning. And now, first we have been, according to also our cooperation good with the colleagues from Naturmonument, especially Farm Peak, we found that the optimum situation will be about 0.5, 0.6 animal per hectare of mouse per hectare. But then we found that for the biodiversity of the type of landscape we have, we should have a little less animals to come to the situation 0.3 head from the 1 hectare of animals. So that's what we are doing here. We are slowly going down for the number of animals. Of course, it depends on the local situation. We are working. We have no flooded area, unfortunately. We can stop the water for the kind of the season. So that's why we decided for such a situation. So I think it's very also interesting why we choose the Scottish Highlander. Yep. I think Ruben is coming from your area, because when I first time visit Veluwe Zoom area, it was beginning of the end of the 20th century, beginning of the 21st century. I found these animals are the ideal animal for my area, because the possibility of whole year grazing is very important, especially for the combination cows and conics. That's why I choose the Scottish Highlander. Also, looking back for the historical aspect of these animals living there in the Middle Ages on the area, which was definitely decided by my colleagues, professors from the Agriculture Academy. There's also one other thing connected with it. That is the problem, what has been mentioned by Perry with the wolves. I think we are touching very sensitive moment about the wolves' role and about appetite of the wolves for the domestic animals, which are very controversial. Actually, what I observe in my area, I have about 10 wolves realizing they are living on the area of Odra Delta Nature Park. And we found that in their diet, the horses and the cows are not in the first stage. They are first interested in beavers, what's very interesting is Canadian, that is the spécialité de la maison for wolves. Then it's a little bit deers, roe deers, and then cows, horses never. We never found the situation where the horses has been eaten. I found the 2 youngs last year. I found 2 young cows eaten by the wolves. So that is also very individual situation about the appetite, about the possibility, the many possible on the area. So that is also very interesting with reducing number of the animals by the local predators. So I think that is the answer for the question about the situation. Also, what Mariusz said also, it should be compromised between the agro-environment subsidies and the natural capacities, but this is no way. Financial situation of our societies is limited by the finance, and sometimes the proper preparation of the application for agro-environment is a good idea to have an income for the management activities, but it should be kind of the compromise which we are actually now going on. But for all things, in my opinion, it's the time to recognize the individual system, individual situation between the habitats, grazing, and the natural population, especially with the bird life.
Yep. Thank you very much, Casimir. So I have to apologize because of the time. We have to go to a finish. So, Marius, I would like to give you a moment to say some last words if you want to touch upon this issue, also in relationship to birds for your area. But
the density of birds in Beka Nature Reserve, it depends of many factors, not just grazing. It depends of water level or some sort of predators, or because it is our issue too, foxes or something like that. And the whole part of these factors matters in density of birds. But when we have grazing like now, so we have our own herd of conics, and we can decide in which part of nature reserve it will be grazing. It's much easier to prepare good habitats for birds. So then in this way, we are trying to move up this density of birds to create more appropriate habitats. So the density in our experience is going increase, but not so fast like we will want. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What I really like about the Polish situation is that it's almost comparable to the mountain situation, where in spring you bring the cattle to the mountains, and then later you take them out just before the winter. So it's almost comparable, the north and the south of Poland. Yeah. Thank you very much. I think there's still a lot to discuss. A lot of questions are answered. My main takeaway from this this webinar is that natural grazing is a very interesting and useful component of management of Natura 2000 areas. But after 40 years, we still have to learn, and this learning process and cycle, we should really be very active with that, preferably connected with research. And might be a good moment to inform you that the MPAC working group of Eurosite is also thinking about adding more grazing information to the management planning toolkit, because we would like to provide more resources on this important issue. So thank you very much, all presenters. Thank you for your very interesting stories and answers. Personally, I really liked it. We will hope to see you during the grazing study tour, either being a parent or not, Ruben, at that time. But for the others, please, if you're interested in becoming connected to Eurosite or also to the Eurosite working groups, please feel free to contact us at info@eurosite.org. And looking forward to see you in the May grazing study tour. Thank you very much.